Yeah, there's a really deep and rich tradition. I am terming it the blues idiom wisdom tradition. Ralph Ellison, he dealt with what he called the Negro idiom, which is basically a style, a way of being, a way of seeing, right? As a definite, but he always put that within the context of America and American tradition and thought and practices, generally, okay? It's within that frame. And Albert Murray, he came up with the blues idiom. Okay, that was his variation. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay, I'd like to share something that I actually shared on Jamie Wheel's book party for his latest book, Recapture the Rapture.
Sweet.
Yeah, so what I did was I shared a poetic description of the blues that Ralph Ellison gave in 1945 for an essay called Richard Wright's Blues. Okay. Then I fast forward 50 years to Albert Murray being interviewed and being asked, well, what is the blues idiom? And then I give my own take on what the blues idiom wisdom tradition entails. Okay. This is very compact and it can be unpacked. But here's the basics.
Okay, go.
So this is what Ralph Ellison said about the blues. Ralph Ellison said that the blues is an impulse to keep the painful details and episodes of a brutal experience alive in one's aching consciousness, to finger its jagged grain, and to transcend it, not by the consolation of philosophy, but by squeezing from it a near tragic, near comic lyricism. As a form, the blues is an autobiographical chronicle of personal catastrophe expressed lyrically. So this is next will be Albert Murray's definition of what is the blues idiom. He said, it's an attitude of affirmation in the face of difficulty, of improvisation in the face of challenge. It means that you acknowledge that life is a low-down, dirty shame, yet confront that fact with perseverance, with humor, and above all, with elegance. Okay? So what I'm calling the blues idiom wisdom tradition is part of the existential equipment for living. That was a favorite expression of Albert Murray's. He got it from Kenneth Burke. He called art as equipment for living. So the blues idiom wisdom tradition is that, part of the existential equipment for living derived from the lived embodied experience of Black Americans in American culture. There is truth, goodness, and beauty in this tradition. And of course, it isn't just confined to my Black American ancestors and their descendants. One's cultural gifts, such as blues, gospel, jazz, funk, soul, and the like, are innovated into the world. They become gifts to the world. The blues idiom wisdom tradition is therefore available to each and every one of us if we can transcend the fakery and what Stanley Krauss called the decoy of race and embrace the infinite cosmic game of culture. If we can do this, we can then intelligently choose such embodied wisdom.
Damn. Man, that's really powerful. Very powerful. I'm a psychotherapist. And of course, arguably the thing that is most salient, heartful, soulful is the trauma of the past of the clients. I mean, the trauma shapes them. And I'm sort of awestruck, and because I'm not sure I made that connection before, but as you note this as a philosophy and a wisdom for a traumatic past, it's just beautiful and elegant. And that particular way, it captures some aspect of that.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it, because that's what it does. I mean, Murray said that. He said, Black folks, we didn't have psychoanalysis. You create what you need. So we created the blues.
Blues. Huh.
You know? So, but see, this is also, and we could riff on this. This is also a post-tragic sensibility.
Right. Use Zach Stein's terms and things.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is something that, pre-tragic is like when you're innocent, you're a child, you're just, everything is just, you're just in the flow with energy. Yep. And then every human being has to deal with the tragic dimensions of life, the understanding that we have mortality, that not only we have mortality, but those we love have mortality. And then there's catastrophe. That's that catastrophe that was referred to, that we go through, the blues, the reality of the blues as such, as Albert Murray put it. But then to go from the tragic, and the tragic is going to be there, understand that realization, but can you then deal with your trauma in a way that trauma isn't something that will arrest your development, so that you can that you can't really grow, that you're stuck emotionally. And so that if you can work through, integrate, heal, then while keeping the tragic sensibility, you go to a post-tragic. What I read there to you was a post-tragic philosophy, man.
Right. Right. Totally. That's what, I'll just say then, as a therapist, what you actually are trying to do really on an individual level. Yeah. And what this speaks to is trying to do this at a cultural level. What you try to do is you honor the tragedy of the past, right? And the longing for the pre-tragic, oh God, before the world was catastrophic, I used to think this and now I'm in this. And then there's the glimmer of what would be fulfilling on the backside of this. What would enable this to, enabled me to grow in a fulfilling way and find, once again, a sense of security on the backside of this post-tragic. And so it just echoes such a hopeful, honest vision that it certainly moves me in a particular way.
Thank you, man. Thank you. And that's what we, Dwayne Elgin, who is also, his work was foundational for the course. He has a book called The Living Universe. That's very influential on my conception of, like, if we look at the cosmos as living, the universe as living, not as dead. Because in modernity, it's like, you've just got dead matter, right? And you're just swirling around aimlessly with absolutely no purpose to your existence. That's brought a lot of alienation, enemy, and disconnection from our religious traditions, from our soul traditions, all of that stuff, right? But if we say the universe is alive and we're a part of the universe and a part of nature, we're not separate from these things, then you can have an orientation, and rooted cosmopolitanism is connected to this, that allows you to say, my goodness, the post-tragic acknowledges that. But if you woke up this morning and the sun was shining and you're breathing, that's something to be thankful for. If you can live in an attitude of gratitude, despite and even through the stuff that you go through, then you're starting to get to like a post-tragic orientation and sensibility. You know what I mean?
Totally.
But blues music, and so the blues itself, the tragic is blues as such. The post-tragic is represented in Murray's work in Stomp the Blues by blues music. So he would say, well, even if the lyrics are about a tale of woe, the insouciance of the saxophones could be sexily saying, well, but hey, and then the trumpets could be saying, playing like a laughter, laughing, using the comic dimensions, or the trombones, dignified, you know what I mean? So you have in one statement, the realization of the tragic, the tale of woe, but other responses to that And then when you have that statement, he calls that the fully orchestrated blues statement that the big band in jazz represented. So we haven't even talked this deep. So this is very, very profound, deeply rooted. It's wide, it's deep. It's mature. That's why I mentioned Dwayne Elgin.
Right.
Dwayne Elgin said that he will ask people around the world, where do you think humanity is when you look at, childhood, young adulthood, maturity, almost to a T, they say, teenager, young adulthood. Okay? Mm-hmm. And what this is a very mature American-based way of seeing reality. Talk about the ontology, seeing reality, right? And dealing and being in that reality. So to take a jazz musician, one of the things in the hero and the blues that Murray talks about is like, he uses the analogy of the heroes tradition. And like, if you have, the swordsman is like a sword. Okay, take a sword, right? Okay. The sword is put through the fire. That steel is put through the fire to become stronger. Right. That's antagonistic cooperation. So, what we go through ultimately, approach properly. And once you get through that trauma, these become ways to learn and to grow. You see what I'm saying? So as a jazz musician has to develop skill, right? Has to develop that procedural knowledge, skill of craft, right? To riff on your boy Vervaeke.
Right. Vervaeke, you know what you're talking about.
You gotta have that procedural, right?
Right.
But you also have that perspectival. So the blues idioms give me that perspectival. You learn how to play, first of all. You learn how to communicate. You learn how to see things and be in the world with other people, that intersubjective reality. Then you learn to play with others. Now, others have their own perspective. So in jazz, you play, you agree upon, like, what songs are we going to play? Like, what's the order of the solos? What's the chord changes we're going to use? But when in the midst of playing, you leave room for improvisation. You leave room for the unexpected to arise, okay, out of that complexity, right? See? And so the blues and jazz model is not just confined to music. It's really about ways of being and seeing and behaving and acting in the world in a mature post-tragic fashion.
No doubt.
Since the United States is a young nation, and since, if we say, well, if we look at the development of our nation, we're pretty young.
That's right.
So this is a very much, and the irony of this coming from a Black American tradition where, because of the fallacy of race, people are not going to look at it and take it seriously. And you've got answers right there.
Totally.
From within the actual cultural tradition and thought of some of the greatest cultural thinkers and writers of the 20th century.
Beautiful. In fact, I was just